Kerry Lynn Cassidy, who needs no introduction. Everybody knows you from Project Camelot. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. Like I said, a treasure having you on. I feel sad that a lot of guests have told me that my program doesn't have the audience population amount that they feel is worthy of them being a guest on my show, like John Lash and Steve Greer did, but you didn't do that, so thank you again. And a couple disclaimer things I need to point out here. First of all, to all those people, and this is the last time I'm going to give these two disclaimers on my show, by the way. Done about the last dozen shows, and this will be the last time. First of all, I did get an email from YouTube a couple weeks ago saying your channel has a lot of spam. We don't think that your channel may be worthy of being on YouTube, so we're going to investigate you. Translate into American, that's another way of saying your channel exposes a lot of stuff that the powers that be don't want people to hear, so we're going to consider banning you like we did Alex Jones, and I hope that doesn't happen to me, so everybody please have me in your prayers and hope that doesn't happen. And also, in addition to that, I want to say that the last 2.5 years of my show, with the exception of the last dozen shows since I've been saying this, I have made the mistake of having my Skype recorder on stereo mode, which if you've listened to my shows with headphones, you would have my voice in one ear and the guest voice in the other. I thought that wasn't the problem. I thought it was some sort of a sabotage or something, but it wasn't. It was my mistake. I have put the mode on mono mode and not stereo mode on the Skype recorder, so that doesn't happen. So any of the shows that I've done over the past 2.5 years, I recommend not listening to them with headphones, so you don't have to deal with that. Just find a way to with a computer, turn the volume up enough, but if you do have to listen to headphones, hey, it is what it is. You'll have to listen to my voice in one ear and the guests in the other, but that's not going to be happening. Ever since my interview with Leo Zagami, which I'm going to actually reference a few times in that interview because I know you interviewed him, and there were a few things I talked about in the interview that need elaboration, but that'll be later on. That's not going to be an issue anymore. That won't be a problem. So with that out of the way, Kerry Cassidy, one of the most significant and most well-known guests I've had on in quite a while. No disrespect to any of the other past recent guests, but Kerry Cassidy is, of course, a household name relative to them. Mention your name, a lot of people are going to know you, and I do hope that that helps with my audience count. Doing 2-hour shows for ever since November 2013 has cost me what could be a big audience because humans by nature have lousy attention spans, but I do hope that will change with you being on and some of the great things I'm sure that you're going to be talking about here. So without further ado, I've babbled long enough. I'm going to give you half an hour to 45 minutes now to talk about anything and everything that you feel the world needs to hear. And once again, I've asked my angels and guides to make sure that nobody sabotages this and Mercury retrograde doesn't give us any problems. So you've got the floor, 30 to 45 minutes. Talk all you want, anything that you need to get out to the world.
Okay. Well, actually, I prefer the Q&A sort of procedure, but because my, not exactly prepared to do a presentation here, I can say that there's lots of kind of current things that I can touch on, and I did quite a big expose the other day called an overview of ET intervention on Earth, and that's getting quite a few views on my YouTube channel. Thank God, because this is a very crucial issue, and of course the powers that be don't want us to know. So that's what my mission is all about, is revealing the truth behind the matrix, if you want to call it that, and the realities of the ET presence, and specifically the secret space program, its existence. There is, of course, more than one program out there, but the main secret space program that is run by the U.S. and Britain with Russia as a partner, the Five Eyes, as they call them as well, and a few other countries sort of getting involved. Now, I want to say that this is the most recent news, which is that I don't know if people know about a forum called Above Top Secret. I think it's pretty well known in the sector. And I actually have never had an account over there. At least I don't remember having one. So I created a new account and just happened to post something that I recently posted on my site, which is an article I wrote about what's going on with the whole Kit Green alien autopsy, Rich Dolan story. And lo and behold, my first post on ATS was taken off and I was banned. Just like that. No no warning, no ceremony, no nothing. And actually, I had gone on there last night to try to see if there were any reactions to what I posted. And as it happened, couldn't find my account, couldn't find anything. It was just coming up blank, which is, I don't usually post on forums. I post on Avalon.net, which is Project Avalon.net, my former partner Bill Ryan's forum, on very few occasions here and there, and so on. But most of the time I just don't have time. I never have had time in the 15 years of operation. It's just, I guess, investigating the story and chatting are two kind of different modes. And so I don't really get involved in that. However, I thought it might be fun to raise some interest over at ATS, abovetopsecret.com, because I knew about the forum. I knew it was run by the CIA, and that's no secret. And it's not even above top secret. But the thing is that I was not prepared to have my account completely disappear into the ozone. I have had no correspondence from ATS at all. So then I thought after last night that I imagined that I made an account. Like maybe because I'm very busy, I do a lot of stuff. So maybe I thought I did it and I didn't do it or something. But then I remembered doing it. So then I thought maybe I did it wrong because I don't usually go onto forums. And as it happened, serendipity, and happens in Camelot all the time. So you might say it's intentional or whatever. But this wonderful person wrote to me this morning saying, "Hey, you were banned on ATS. I'm really sorry to hear that." So that alerted me to the fact that my account didn't just disappear into the ozone because it was just coming up blank. It was a really odd thing. I thought I was doing something wrong. There's something wrong with my computer. I didn't know what. And so then I've actually written to them saying what happened to my account because they never notified me even to tell me I'm banned. And this is all in the span of 24 hours after posting a very interesting article that I've written. And I wrote that a few days, actually now I think it's about a week old or something, on my website. And it is a fascinating article and I do want people to read it. And it's basically saying Kit Green alien autopsy leaked docs, and it's updated on July 23rd. So on top of a bunch of stuff that I had posted on that one post, I added this particular article, which is very specifically saying what CIA, NSA, NASA, why do they lie? So that was the title of the article. And all of this is now on my Facebook. I put it on the Avalon forum, and I posted on my Twitter and various places. So this is what's going on right now, just cutting edge right this second. So apparently this article has hit a nerve, and I think that's really interesting. I'm going to have to make a video about this. But this is a great kind of heads up for you and your audience, kind of life in Camelot as it happens. I have been interviewing whistleblowers from above top secret for the past 15 years. And I started Project Camelot actually on my own. And then I was joined by Bill Ryan when I interviewed him about the Serpo.org project. And this was, again, 15 years ago, back in 2005. And then what happened was after I interviewed Bill, we sort of hit it off and we agreed to meet again. And I kept in correspondence. And then I went to Egypt. My mother passed away and I had a small inheritance. I went to Egypt with William Henry and Jordan Maxwell to investigate the signs of Atlantis in Egypt, because it was something I've always been interested in. I had actually been to Egypt before that with my mother, as it happens. So anyway, on the way back from Egypt, I decided to stop over in England and visit Bill, and he had promised to take me to the stone circles and Stonehenge and various things that I'd never seen. And so that's exactly what happened, and we really connected, and that's where we decided to put our sort of skill sets together and create Project Camelot to get the truth out. he was a webmaster and a writer, and I was basically a filmmaker. I worked in Hollywood for about 20 years in all aspects of production and development, and also became an independent producer trying to package projects, which I could not get off the ground. And that sent me on my way to make my first UFO documentary. And I interviewed Bill Ryan for that documentary. And that's how we ended up connecting and starting Camelot. We basically decided we both had the same mission, which was to get the truth out. And I also had past life memories at the time of King Arthur and the Round Table. And I know it sounds a bit bizarre, but nonetheless, that is connected to Project Camelot in a big way. And I believe that we're the return of Guinevere and Arthur. And I know it's a complicated story. I'm putting it in my book, which is going to come out. I now have a possible publisher, but I don't know what's going to happen with that. So we'll see what happens. But I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I just want to come back to the alien autopsy. So I have started to investigate the alien autopsy, which I really didn't investigate in the past. I just never got around to it. I knew about it. I had seen some of the footage kind of briefly, but never really thought about it. But then I met Colin Wolford, who is English, and he came to my conference, the Awake and Aware conference I do every year in Watford, England, which is in North London, I believe. And so he told me that he was interested in the alien autopsy, and I had heard the word of mouth saying, oh, it's a hoax. And at the time, I just have this really good radar that I'm very intuitive, and when something hits me wrong, it just hits me wrong, and I know it's a lie, and I know it's false. So when he told me he was interested in investigating it, and I then said to him, well, doesn't everyone think it's a hoax? And he said, yes, they do, but actually he had been investigating it for years on his own and thinks there's a reason they think that, and so on. So we got to talking. Eventually I had him on my show. And I got this hit saying Colin was right and they were all wrong. Okay, so that's what, and I remembered I also had this intuition about it from years ago. So then what happened was I did a show with Colin, and what happened was that Spyros, this person who claims ownership and to be the original person who hoaxed everything, even though it came out in 1997 from a cameraman who was from the military, who has actually made a video, you can get it on the internet, claiming that he's the cameraman who filmed the footage and kept it for 50 years hidden in his garage or something. Because at the time, the military he was working for was splitting between, I think it was the Army Air Force when they split. And at any rate, he just had it in film canisters, old-fashioned film, all those years. And so now, fast forward to, I think it's that was in 1997 it came out, because he sold it to, the story goes, Santilli. Ray Santilli, who was a music producer, I believe. And I've talked to Ray Santilli now, and I've talked to Spyros on Twitter, on a very long conversation going with Spyros, basically claiming that he owns it, because what he did was he went onto YouTube and had his lawyer, or he, claimed a copyright strike against my channel on YouTube. And this all happened back in end of May, which means for 3 months I was not able to live broadcast on my channel, and I do a live broadcast every week on my channel and on YouTube, and I put ads on it, and this is how I pay my rent. So this was a big attack on me, and it was weird because he did it the thing was put on YouTube, and he did it within 24 to 48 hours or something. And so I think that he was tipped off by the CIA, and whether he's working for them or not is another question. But so what happened was he gave me this strike. YouTube believed him, when in fact there's a huge controversy between him and Santilli on who owns the footage. who hoaxed it. And then on top of it, there's the cameraman who supposedly filmed it in reality all those years ago. And so we're talking in the 1940s, back around Roswell, although from what I understand, this is not the exact film of Roswell. It's the film of a crash that happened around the time of Roswell in a similar area. I think in Socorro, if I remember the location. So I know this might sound kind of convoluted, but if people know what's happening, you can always go on my website as well to get caught up. You can listen to, so that gave me a strike. So that now I have another YouTube channel, luckily. And I have been live broadcasting from there. Then I download it, I edit it slightly, so it's not exactly the same number of minutes. And I put it up on my regular YouTube channel where I have over 230,000 subscribers. So it's not small. On top of that, I have 62 million viewers. And we just went up by another million. I think it's about in the last 6 to 9 months. So it's, a $62 million I wish. 62 million viewers worldwide is no small potato, so to speak. So I'm kind of a force to be reckoned with on YouTube. So when they attack me in this way, and they don't let me have my say, and they basically give me a copyright strike, and make it harder for me to make any money and stay alive, it's quite an attack. So then I recorded another interview with Colin Wolford in which we had no pictures. And I took all the pictures. I just wouldn't do pictures because if these two guys, Santilli and Spiros, are fighting constantly, both of them wrote to me saying they owned the copyright. Both of them showed me documents. One is at the Library of Congress, apparently, that Santilli says he owns it, and Spiros sent me some document that says he owns it. And when I told Santilli that Spiros sent me this document, Santilli said he's going to get his lawyers to get rid of that document somehow, or contest the document that Spiros is sending around. And Spiros only came forward, I think it was, I don't maybe have my years all correct, but I think he didn't come forward until sometime in the year 2000 and something. But at any rate, he showed up later and suddenly, as a magician, claimed he did everything. Whereas Santilli says back in '97, he hired Spiros to help fake some of the footage, but he used some of the real footage as well. That's at least the story as I understand it. I know it's convoluted, but the weird thing is how I got attacked right away. So that wrapped me into the story in a bigger way. Maybe if they'd left me alone, I might have let the thing go, although I am sort of a stickler when it comes to research. So now ATS has banned me for one post, and it's all about this alien autopsy, and it's about what has come out lately. And it was some kind of weird serendipity that happens in my life, and not an accident at all. In reality, probably the ET's helping me as usual, because I had asked Colin to come on my show, I've been asking him for 6 months or a year, but finally I got in touch with him very recently around that May time, and I invited him on my show, and I really tried to get him to stick to a date, and a time. And he finally agreed, and we came out with the show. I got banned, and at the same time, the CIA, whoever you want to say, this supposed Australian researcher named James Rigney, and don't worry, all of this is on my website. And I made at least one other video about this so far, so if you lose track of what I'm talking about, you can go back and do some more research. But at any rate, it's just weird that suddenly 12 pages that were written in 2001, emails from Kit Green's a very famous CIA MK Ultra doctor, and he's very good friends with Hal Puthoff, who is also CIA and former Navy intelligence, from what I understand, probably current. and very instrumental, both of them, into the Stars Academy. So none of this is accidental, okay? But suddenly these 12 pages came out through supposedly this kind of hapless researcher who loves space in Australia, who nobody knows much about, named James Rigney, who then gave the document, I guess, including, I don't know who, if he gave this to a well-known researcher named Grant Cameron, along with what's called another release of documents, which is, I think it was part of a package deal that involved what's called the Admiral Wilson footage that I've done a lot of investigation into and made shows on, and also have done a presentation at my own conference it was at the end of June, I think, and I got a standing ovation for that. But I've also now put it on YouTube, and I'm going to do another show on that as well. At any rate, in these 12 pages, Kit Green is now, was saying that the alien autopsy was real and that the body was not human, quote unquote. And he was talking to Bob Bigelow, he was talking to Eric Davis, and a few other players. I think Puthoff is one of them, back in 2001. So this set of 12 pages of email correspondence between them and Kit Green has now surfaced around the exact same time as when I interviewed Colin Wolford, bringing back up this alien autopsy question. Call it serendipity or call it engineered, all right? And so then on top of it, Rich Dolan, being the investigator he is, then decided, and knowing Kit Green, as actually I've spoken to Kit Green years ago, many years ago, and very briefly, and apparently Rich Dolan is also in touch with him. So he arranged and made an interview with Kit Green, and this is very recently, like the last 2 weeks, I think it is. And then all of a sudden, the interview Rich Dolan did, supposedly Kit came back and said he didn't want him to release the interview. So Rich Dolan was completely stumped, it appears. And then supposedly the new thing came out. Was it going to be, oh, Kit Green never wanted it released. He only wanted him to release a transcript, a written transcript of the interview, and or what some people are saying won't even be a transcript, but will be a summary. So the plot thickens, because why all of a sudden is Kit Green changing his story? Why, after all these years, is he coming forward? And Rich said, oh, by the way, everyone, he is now claiming that the so-called not human body is human, and that it's a human with a disease, except something's different about the head. And I don't understand what he is focusing on about the head. Now, we also know that Roger Lear, who's also a doctor, he was a podiatrist, a foot doctor who did removed alien implants. Although I showed him an implant I have, and he didn't want to touch it. So that's interesting. But at any rate, he basically, way back in those years, Colin has a clip showing him being interviewed about the alien autopsy and saying that, yes, it was authentic, yes, it's a real body, and yes, it's not human. So we've got two doctors saying it's not human, both of them fairly well known, both of them with ties to the CIA. However, Dr. Roger Lear is now deceased, so you can't ask him. But at any rate, Kit Green did say the email correspondence that he wrote back in 2001 is authentic and real. So he said that recently. But he's now contradicting his story. Well, I don't buy it. So I wrote this article explaining why I don't buy it, and also saying with what could be, this is not for sure, but it is possible, that what Kit Green is going to come forward with, but he's not allowed to say, which is that the body is a biological robot. In other words, it looks and acts like a biological organism. It bleeds and so on and so forth, but it's in essence an android. And this would parallel exactly with the Nazca aliens, who are the same thing. In other words, they're androids, they're biological robots. And that story is a huge story. And I just interviewed Jaime Maussan, who apparently has a completely different set of information than I do. And then the remote viewers who remote viewed it very accurately back in the day when Gaiam TV went there to investigate. And I've talked with Jay Widener one-on-one about the situation. And so I have done quite a bit of research on that story. And the thing is that you have to wrap your mind around why this matters. First of all, the Nazca aliens, that story is never, I'm told by a very top secret, high level source I have known for many, many years, will quote unquote never see the light of day. Never, never, never. And he is incredibly read in. He's what we call, I think I can say this fairly, an umbrella agent. And if you don't know what an umbrella agent is, that means it's an agent who covers all the bases, 360 degrees. He can do anything and everything requested of him. And that includes communicating with aliens. Now, this is very important because he was called in as a consultant on the Nazca alien story. And my understanding is the Nazca aliens have at least been dated to go back thousands of years. Now, it's not a hoax any more than the alien autopsy appears to have been. However, you have to wrap your mind around why is this so important. Even more secret than aliens is the fact that aliens coming to Earth could have been androids, okay? And that in essence, artificial intelligence, aliens brought artificial intelligence with them coming to Earth. So an AI, by the way, is like the hottest topic ever in the secret kind of milieu, which they don't tell you, and which the least amount of information is out there about. So alien, AI, and androids, etc., all of this is our biggest enemy out there, and this is why they don't want the truth out. And this is why suddenly I'm getting hit on because of the Kit Green statements I'm making, questioning him as to why he would lie, why we would change his story this late. I even said, look, is the head of mind control for the CIA being mind controlled himself? Has he had his mind wiped that he comes forward, all these years later and changes his diagnosis? I don't believe it. I'm sorry. I don't think. Now, there's another scenario. Could he have been lying all those years ago when he wrote those emails and it came up with his diagnosis? Could he have known that it was an android and had to mislead them to the degree of saying it's not human? When you say it's not human, what is it? Okay, it's an interesting use of words. And so this is what we're talking about. This is how the CIA plays games. And so I don't know how long I've talked, but you're welcome to ask me any questions. I have other stories I can talk about. I mean, there's just so much that it's better when you ask me questions because otherwise it's just a wide open playing field.
If that's the way you want to go about it, then, well, we'll go about it that way. And, well, there's some things I did come ready to discuss. And, well, I've been criticized for filibustering my guests a little too much. That's one caveat to not in interrupting them. I may filibuster them. So there is one little filibuster of sorts I need to give you regarding some very important information that seemed to have come up a lot in the old days of Project Camelot, and even comes up in the present day. And I need to get your take on this as well, give your input and whatnot. So without further ado, one area has been the whole Anunnaki thing and the genetic manipulation of humanity. I know that's come up a lot with you, and I want to point out that in a series of interviews that Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis did, he actually said that Zecharia Sitchin's first 3 books are extremely accurate. His timelines are a little off, but they're extremely accurate in terms of the events. Now, when I first heard that, I was a little caught off guard, because I remembered from your interview with Leo Zagami, and I did actually address this with Leo when I interviewed him, and I'll give you end this filibuster by telling you what he had to say. I remembered him actually telling you that Sitchin did actually have connections to the Vatican and the Illuminati, and he had the job of disinforming about things. And that I also remember that Arizona Wilder, who David Icke interviewed in his Revelations of Mother Goddess documentary, said that Sitchin was a disinformer who had the job of disinforming about the reptilians and the Illuminati, and she even said Sitchin was a shapeshifter. David Icke responded by saying that might explain why Sitchin warned me not to mention the reptilians in my work after I explained to him why asked him why he never said anything about the reptilian aliens in his work, despite the mountain of evidence that there is a serpent or reptilian race from ancient Sumeria, in addition to the large human-like Anunnaki-ties that Zecharia Sitchin glorifies. Now, when I met Andrew Bartzis at a conference in October 2013 in Sarasota, I decided to settle this whole thing once and for all, and I basically told him everything that I had told you, and I asked him, I don't get it, how could Sitchin have been accurate if he was literally a reptilian disinformer? Now, Bartzis told me something that, we'll take a deep breath, we're going to jump off the deep end here. He actually told me that there are entities known as timeline watchers who, through a very complex mechanism that would take a long time to explain, but in a nutshell, the way it works is these timeline watchers have the ability to interfere with someone's spiritual body and physical body in a way that causes them to perceive timelines differently. And when you were interviewing Leo Zagami, and when David Icke was interviewing Arizona Wilder, Zagami and Wilder were actually victimized by these timeline watchers to cause them to spew out disinformation about Sitchin, about him being a disinformer, which at the time they believe was true. Now, when I told Leo Zagami this, I was like, I'm sure you have a big shock on your face look to hear me tell you that you had been brainwashed by timeline watcher entities. Do you have anything to say about this? Well, his response was that he, okay, maybe that what I'm saying may be true here, but he does have evidence nonetheless that Sitchin was compromised, so to speak, and perhaps fed false information dealing with his later work, which would make sense. If Sitchin's first 3 books were extremely accurate, then the Illuminati would perceive him as a threat to their agenda because he's exposing things about humanity's past that they don't want people to know about, so they would try to compromise him and cause his 4th book Onward to perhaps be filled with some incorrect information, which Sitchin probably believed was true but didn't realize he had been compromised. And also this whole thing about the what exactly is the Anunnaki? Well, it seems to be, the term refers to actually a hodgepodge of different ETs and not just the one Sitchin talks about. And I have heard from many other interviews that the reptilians that David Icke talks about and the Anunnaki that Sitchin glorifies did make an alliance many years ago, at least the malevolent factions of those groups, to control humanity. But since David Icke was duped into believing Sitchin was a fraud, he didn't say anything about that in any of his books. So I think it's only fair.
Let me just stop you right there, okay? Because first of all, I met Zecharia Sitchin right before he died, so I saw him in person, which with a psychic intuitive such as myself, that's important. That can add to your knowledge of someone. Number 2 is that Jordan Maxwell told me privately that Sitchin felt he was in touch with and downloading Enki, and that's who basically wrote his book on Enki, I think it's one of his last books. The other thing is that Zecharia Sitchin is accurate about his depiction of a lot of the interpretation of the Sumerian tablets. A lot of people object to some of his interpretation. And yes, I believe he was compromised to some degree. You could say in a sense that he didn't emphasize the reptilian side of the Anunnaki who were invaded by the reptilians. It's not that they were working with them, they were invaded by them, they were taken over by them, genetically invaded, okay, the way that's what the reptilians do. And Draco, it was the Draco, and they go around and invade and take over planets, and they genetically manipulate the races that they come across and so on and so forth. And so what you get are Anunnaki that are humanoid and also have Anunnaki, which are basically Anunnaki Draco or Anunnaki reptilian hybrids. And so this is a story that Sitchin in essence wouldn't tell you, but I have to say that you have to understand when somebody is working for the Vatican or whoever they're working for. In Sitchin's case, he came forward with the truth first, and he didn't come forward with the whole truth and nothing but the truth because obviously he wants to stay alive, and he's making a deal with the Vatican and whoever is around him. At the same time, he's releasing what he can. It's true of every witness I have, every whistleblower. They can't tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. They tell you as much as they're able to, and then if necessary, they even wrap in consciously and purposely pieces of disinfo that they've even been told to give you. So in the case of the Anunnaki, what can I tell you? They're real. Yes, they're here on Earth. I just did a whole video kind of talking about that, how they put a frequency fence in humans, in our DNA to basically, I believe more or less, and I'm not a biologist or geneticist, so I may characterize this wrong, but to put a block in between certain DNA and other DNA, and our junk DNA was not junk at all, and we were led to believe it was all these years, and that it's actually waking up, and we are awakening the strands of DNA. We're a 12-strand DNA race, and some say 24 and even more, and that partly because of the area of space we're going through and the energies coming into Earth, we are awakening. In other words, I'm working to awaken humanity. There are lots like me trying to do the same thing, but at the same time, we're having help. And we're having help not only from various friendly ET races that do want to see this seeding of humanity succeed and move on to ascension, meaning moving out of 3D, going into 4D, and make it up to 6D, etc. But at the same time, this situation is helped by this incoming sort of, if you want to call it super wave, that Paul LaViolette, a scientist that I interviewed years ago, and actually I'm in touch with him recently, and he had talked about a super wave. I believe the super wave is here and incoming, and we've got testimony to that in the back years that I've been doing this project. So we have help is a way of saying it. The energies are promoting this whole change in society such that the truth has resonance, and the humans more and more are turning on aspects of their DNA that have been, locked for many years, and that though even those that couldn't discern the truth are now starting to get a sense of what's true and what's not, so they can't be lied to as easily, and so it goes. And this is why we have dozens, if not hundreds of millions of YouTube channels trying to get the truth out in whatever way the individuals see fit. And of course, my channel is one of those. So I think I've answered all that. As far as, Leo Zagami and I forget who else the other person was that are supposed to be on another timeline. I mean, Zagami knows a certain amount. He doesn't know everything. Okay, so he may know, he did an excellent interview with me, and probably one of his best and most honest. I have to tell you that he was taken over after that. He was actually possessed, and I have evidence of that. I guess he got over that possession. I don't know, how that possession has affected anything he said subsequent to the interview he did with me. I basically kind of made him famous, if you want to call it that, which is what Camelot ends up doing with all my interviewees, just because of the nature. It's not, I don't take credit for it, but it's from the nature of Camelot. Project Camelot is based on the real King Arthur Camelot Round Table. That energy surrounds Camelot and everything I do. And so when I interview somebody, it's not just because I have a certain number of, a lot of viewers and subscribers around the world, but we've continued to have an impact on the world. And that is all thanks to the Camelot Roundtable that was created it's now a virtual roundtable, you could call it. And of course, involves a lot more people than it used to. So I hope that answers your question. If you want to ask me more like exact questions, I'll be glad to go forward with that.
Okay. You kind of caught me off guard a little bit when you said the Anunnaki are still interacting with us. I reasonably believe that's true. However, getting back to what I said earlier about the term Anunnaki, actually, in its broad sense, refers to a hodgepodge of aliens, for lack of a better word, that could be thought of as the son of the universal geneticist entity known as Anu, and the Anunnaki from Nibiru are just one faction. It has been said by some, including Andrew Bartis and also Brad Johnson of Channels of Dronus, who I interviewed and asked him directly, that is the true that the malevolent factions of the Anunnaki from Nibiru are no longer affecting our reality on Earth, and they both said yes. And in fact, Mark Kimmel even went as far as saying in a conference that I was at where he spoke at that he's been told that the Anunnakis on planet of Nibiru actually self-destructed. Make of that whatever you will. But there are other Anunnaki that are affecting our reality. James Gilliland has talked about some very high-level consciousness Anunnaki who have our best intentions at heart, that are definitely trying to help us, and are like basically putting the malevolent reptilians on trial, among other things, and also.
Okay, well, before you continue, because I want to address what you're saying. First of all, I understand the confusion over the term Anunnaki, and of course that's purposeful. But if you go back to the days of Zecharia Sitchin writing about basically trying to interpret the Sumerian tablets, those specific tablets were written by a certain race of beings that are depicted on the walls of the temples in Egypt and Iran and probably Iraq, although I haven't seen them in Iraq because there's such a cover-up over there because they decimated the place by war and destroyed the museum, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is a specific race, and trying to make it, yes, those from heaven who to earth came is what it means. It doesn't mean it's many races, however. It means it's a certain race who came from what the humans at that time considered heaven, but they came to earth. And they were coming at a certain time in our history and ended up in the Bible, such that they are addressed as God in our Bible. And this is part of the problem with the Bible, because you never know when they're really talking about the creator, all of everything, and literally the Anunnaki, who wanted to be seen as God because they were extremely egotistical among a conquering race, among other things. So that is a specific race. Now, of course, there are many ET. There are hundreds of, I guess, millions, even zillions of ET races, and some of them are humanoid and some are not. Now, the evidence is that the particular Anunnaki race that I'm talking about were humanoid initially. They were actually a breakoff of the Pleiadian races, who are also humanoid. And both of them were invaded by the reptilians and Draco all those eons ago. And in the case of the Pleiadians, from what I understand, most of them fought them off fairly successfully, although they are still now using and recruiting humans to help them fight the reptilians, who are constantly trying to interact and invade. And the other portion actually went off and sort of conquered Nibiru, whatever, and took it over, and then were invaded by the Draco, and in essence became reptilian human hybrids, if you will. So that's the sort of lineage through of the Anunnaki, specifically talked about in Sitchin's books and kind of coined in that way. Descended, yes, from Anu, who I am told is actually the sort of one of the kind of kings, or whatever you want to call it, of the humanoid Pleiadian race from which the Anunnaki broke off. Now, he's not the geneticist of all the ETs in the galaxies, whatever. Not in my view. Now, they may be the geneticists who created a lot of the gray races, or at least some of the gray races. The grays are descended from the reptilians. So let me explain. It starts with the Draco, who then the reptilians are descended from. The grays are descended from the reptilians. Okay, so there's a sort of through line there. And then there are the humanoid races. And where the humanoid races go back to, that's a huge mystical question. It could be Lyra. It could be even before Lyra. Who knows? But there are many, many races. There are spider beings. There are insectoids of all kinds. There are I mean, there are plasma beings. There are so many different kinds of ETs. And yes, some of my information comes from Captain Mark Richards, who's been in prison for 35 years for a murder he did not commit, but is said to have masterminded. However, he didn't even do that. And I have interviewed him 10 times. At the 10th interview, I go over all the evidence that Mark brought forward, basically saying that he wasn't even involved in the murder. There were two young guys who worked for him. One of them appears to have been a CIA plant. It's a long story. The young guy was raped when he was a young man. He was kind of psychologically unbalanced, used as a patsy by the Navy, I believe, to basically frame Mark. The person that was killed was a pedophile, okay? And all this evidence was researched by a very top-rate researcher who works for me, who is what you call a CIA, former CIA NSA NOC, non-acknowledged agent, and he is more or less homeless, lives out of his car, but he was working, he was a financial NOC, and he was basically got a burn notice many years ago. I think it was in 2006 or something like that. Anyway, all that information is under what's called unwanted publicity guy. His name is Paul Collin, and he has written a lot on and done tons of investigation. As I say, he's a trained investigator and basically got to the root of some of the framing of what went on with Mark Richards. And I can say that one of our chief critics out there, who used to attack me and even try to find where I live and bang on the door yelling my name. He never found my apartment, by the way. He found another place that I could have, I don't even know if I ever lived there, but I certainly don't now. And didn't when he went to the door. So he made a fool of himself to other people. Luckily, those people weren't home. But nonetheless, so he's been silenced because I believe that he was talked to. And gosh, it's just a very long saga, but I don't know. And as far as your sources go, now, with all due respect, I don't know, I don't think most of them, but I can say that channelers can have good information. They can also be incredibly infiltrated and get bad information. So I would be very careful about that. And all I can say is that some people do, download. Some people get channeled information. I myself am in touch with ETs all the time. I get information all the time, whether I'm tapping into what's called the information field, which is what the sort of secret government likes to call it, according to Pete Peterson, one of our top witnesses, or whether you want to call it, the Akashic records, or when you want to call it the universal mind, which is what, what's that famous psychologist, starting with a J. Anyway, all I can say is, it's up to you to discern the truth and be very, very careful, because the trouble with a lot of these people, and with all due respect, is they may come out, especially in the beginning, with what they're getting as far as downloads, and then they get taken off track, and they get purposely taken off track. This happens all the time. So I'm not going to name names, but some people out there who have good reputations and so on and so forth ended up putting out a lot of disinfo because they were taken over and interfered with. And all I can say is that so far, I seem to be one of the most dangerous people out there, and I am, they try to interfere with me a lot, but they haven't gotten very far at all. And all I can say is that you just have to discern the truth on your own and decide who's telling the truth, whose energy is on it, and also do your own analytical research. Don't just turn off the critical part of your brain just because someone says they're a channeler and you like what they say. It makes you feel good. I mean, it's not about that, So stay critical is what I can say, and stay analytical, add 2 and 2, and try to, figure out the whole game.
Thank you for that advice. I try to give the same advice myself, even though I have been accused of sourcing channelers a lot. But then again, I do think those people do, in a sense, hold the key to getting the answers to many of the questions that we otherwise wouldn't be able to answer. Just put what they say in the back of your mind and keep an open mind. And if evidence comes up that validates what they say, then it's worth taking them maybe a little more seriously. I mean, a lot of stuff Alex Collier was talking about in his 90s presentations that only a handful of people showed up for live. A lot of those things were coming true now. He was talking about the stuff Edward Snowden was talking about with the NSA back then, but nobody takes ET contactees seriously, certainly not in that time, so nobody took him seriously, but I'm sure they do now. And something else I think we need to be definitely taking seriously is I'm going to try to kill a couple birds with one stone here. The extent to which whistleblowers have the ability to get out information, whether or not it's in their best interest to chicken out if they're blackmailed or threatened, and also the extent to which extraterrestrials that are good and care about humanity can actually help those whistleblowers get the info out. Now, I bring this up because Ted Marr, he held a conference that I went to in the Seattle suburbs in June of 2016. A couple of the speakers said that Edward Snowden and his colleagues do have information that they want to expose that would, for all intents and purposes, show that the 9/11 truth movement was right all along. When I ran into Ted Marr at the 2017 Conscious Life Expo, actually it was 2018, I should say, Conscious Life Expo, I asked him what the holdup was, why hasn't Snowden released that? And he was reluctant to give the answer, but after the rest of the audience demanded that he say, because they want to know too, he said that the powers that be made it clear that if Snowden and Glenn Greenwald and anyone else who has those 9/11 truth validating documents were to release it, they would murder lots of innocent people on planet Earth, and that caused Snowden to chicken out. And he also pointed out that Donald Trump, he, for all intents and purposes, is of the light, and he wants to do what JFK failed to do before he was assassinated, but he has been hindered in that regard. Among other things, Ted Marr said that Henry Kissinger, when he met Donald Trump, the purpose of that meeting the main purpose was so Kissinger could tell Trump, you will do what my minions and me tell you to do, or you and your wife and kids and your business partners will be dead. Is that understood? And David Icke's done a pretty good job of sourcing the evidence that shows Donald Trump, if there's anyone that blackmails and threatens him, it's definitely the faction, the Rothschild Zionist factions of Israel, which would include Kissinger. So that raises a question that I often have is, well, okay, why should we have to put up with this threatening and blackmail being a hindrance to the disclosure and the whistleblower movement when we have these ETs out there who have the ability to shut down the powers that be in a heartbeat if they were to pull a doomsday switch, but yet they seem to follow this this unwritten rule of the universe that says, well, we need allow the humans to do this themselves because we can't solve all the problems themselves. That would kind of interfere with natural law, and we have to actually let the powers that be violate natural law and do what they want in regards to free will because the humans need to do it themselves. And I mean, when I heard that Sheldon Neidl was hit by a direct energy weapon of some sort that's now currently kept him in the hospital, the first thing I was like, well, how couldn't his Galactic Federation of Light Council contacts couldn't shield him and protect him? They should be ashamed of themselves for not protecting him. And well, I'm sure he's not the only one. That's just one example. But I'm babbling a lot here and trying to kill a lot of birds with one stone, but this stuff about 9/11 truth being exposed, whistleblowers checking out, and why the ETs can't just come and help us and allow for this stuff to get exposed and protect people from getting murdered if the powers that be make good on their threats. Any comments?
Yes. First of all, any ETs that basically interfere directly with this time-space continuum are negative. All right, because they are interfering with the free will sector, and they are and basically it's like anything. If you walk for a little child, you can't even walk for it. You have to teach a child to walk. They have to walk on their own. So this philosophy is that humans must do it for themselves. Otherwise, they'll never progress into being the basically descendants of Godhead that we are, and also foster other races to come to the fore and grow up, etc. So it's a whole trajectory, and it's obvious that you can't walk for a little kid. Now, they'll never learn the muscles. They'll never develop the muscles. If you serve truth on a platter, they'll never ever learn to discern it on their own. And basically, you interfere with their ability to grow in their free will, etc. So that's major. Now, the one way that positive ETs, as you say, can interfere is through us. In other words, they do contact individuals and they can influence, but they can't make your decisions for you. And anytime they take control, read Arthur C. Clarke, Childhood's End, to see what would happen to humanity in that case. It's major. So, the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, all have a purpose for this sector and for the progression of the various races involved here, and for us exercising and learning to exercise our powers and learning who we truly are, because without any sort of challenges, we would never make it through to the next level, let's say. So, and get to know who we truly are. So it serves a purpose. I always say the dark serves the light in the end of the day. Now, as far as the 9/11 truth and what Snowden has, listen, I can tell you that our witness, Henry Deacon, who came out under his own name, Arthur Neumann, told us nearly 15 years ago, back at the very early days of Camelot, that he was involved with 9/11. He was working for, I am not at liberty to say the exact organization, but I can tell you he basically said, that they engineered it, and that was the state, in essence, the secret government that he worked for. And he's given us a lot of information very early on. I mean, so you can go to my website, projectcamelot.org, projectcamelot.tv, projectcamelotportal.com. It all goes to the same place. And then look under my channels and you'll see the old, the information, or just put in Arthur Neumann or the last name Neumann. It's best if you use just one word when you're searching on Camelot. And you'll find his transcription, the transcribed interviews that we did in the early days with him when he wouldn't let us tape record him. Eventually, he came on stage in Barcelona. He said he'd been working on Mars with Bob Dean when at the end of Bob Dean's presentation before 1,500 people in Barcelona at the Exopolitics conference, and I went on stage with him. And we were told to get off the stage and to shut up, even though it was lunch hour, and by the organizers, who had actually flown him in and paid his way to stay there, but they didn't want him to talk. And they never expected him to tell the truth on stage. And that should have been worldwide news, but of course it wasn't. Basically, we got threats, in essence, from MJ12 at the time, for having been there and been part of that. MJ12 basically divorced any connection with us when prior to that they were supposedly looking upon us relatively favorably. God knows why, but that was the very early days of Camelot. And this is information that came through Dan Burish in the early days, who was basically working for MJ12. Now, as far as 9/11 truth, so Snowden, yes, he has some truth, but he's not. He's a bit derivative. His information in some ways is out there. It's not the most cutting edge. Whether he would be killed over coming forward at this time when he's hiding over under Putin, who knows? Maybe, maybe not, and so on. What else did you talk about? Trying to remember. I don't know.
Well, I think you basically covered it there. You wanted to say something else? Anything else to end this up with before we move on?
No, I mean, it's so important that people realize it's so obvious that, ET can't come and pat you on the head and give you everything. What would be the point of this whole sector if they did that? So yes, we are in contact with ET. Yes, they help when they can, but humans must actually do it for themselves. And that is true all the way through. And if they come down to rescue you, etc., please don't get on the ships, because they will basically be reptilians planning to eat you and use you as slaves, which is what they do anyway. The Anunnaki are still here, as Bob Dean, one of our famous witnesses, said. They're walking the halls of the Pentagon. Sometimes they look quite human. They look they're not even, they're short and bald, and they don't look anything like Anunnaki, from what I understand nowadays. They are operating Israel from within Dimona, and evidence, I said some of the evidence out there, is the Israeli race, basically the Khazars, are descended from the Anunnaki, directly having their DNA. I myself have some Jewish blood. I'm related to Anne Frank, and most of my family would never acknowledge this, but my mother told me this, and we do have an uncle called Frankie, who was a baker from Germany. And so, this is, I don't know what to tell you. This story is, I know it's very convoluted out there, and I know it gets more so because a lot of the people that are even channeling information are not analyzing their own information. They just put it out there. It's, I would never put a channeler on a pedestal. They're like, what do you say? Vessels. Okay. They are vessels. It's like, I don't know, a record player, and you honor the record player. It's typical of what humans do. It's like them loving UFOs and all the technology, but they don't want to know anything about the beings driving the UFOs. It's like loving my car, but not wanting to know who I am. It's so stupid. I can't even believe it. But this is, and it's very, sorry to say this, it's a very male-dominated way of looking at things. It's using form over function, form over what's inside. It's Apollonian versus Dionysian, if you want to go the way of Nietzsche and understand what he had to say. And it's important to dig deeper to get to the real truth.
Okay, I did mention during that thing, I don't think you really touched on this, about Trump. Actually, he wants to be of the light. He wants to be the next JFK, JFK that would not be assassinated for exposing the truth. There's a few things about them that suggest that may be the case. I mean, he was born on the day of a full lunar eclipse. Well, then again, so were lots of other people. 5 people were born and 2 people die on planet Earth every second. So there's a lot of people that were born the same day he was that are still alive who really have no significant lives. But I mean, it's kind of makes you think. And also, even though David Icke said that he's being threatened and manipulated and blackmailed by the Zionist factions of Israel to a great extent, and a 32nd degree Freemason, who I would prefer not to divulge his name, told me Trump's father did have connections to the Freemasons, although he didn't know if it was Freemasons that had been infiltrated by malevolent Illuminati groups, or whether it was the Freemasons who, like the founding fathers, actually had the best interest of humanity at heart. And also Donald Trump, he's Hillary Clinton.
Okay, let me tell you my take, before you go any further, let me tell you my take on Trump. Trump is descended from, I think it's his uncle or somebody who actually, helped the Illuminati by divulging the information of Tesla and analyzing it, getting it out there to them, etc. I think there was a pact made with the Illuminati back in those days to basically pay back Trump's family, and that this is in part how he became president. The election was fixed, it was orchestrated, and I've talked about this in several places, etc., not the least of which is with Paladin. I have this from a secret witness, that Hillary was hacking the election. All they did was Navy got together, a certain group in the Navy, and hacked it back. And it was going for Trump. And so then he won. Now, Trump is, yes, I believe, trying, he is, look, he's not by himself. So it's not a cult of personality. He is working with the Navy, a faction of the Navy. Not all the Navy are on the same side, but the faction of the Navy that are trying to take back our country, the United States. So they do have good intentions. They are trying to out the pedophiles. Whether Trump in his fantasy life wants to be like Kennedy. I mean, I hope he does. That's great. That would be a lovely sort of role model, let's say. But how far he's getting on that score and whether or not he's being interfered with, that's another matter. It's very possible that he's being interfered with. There are a lot of things he could have done even at this point, which has to leave you wondering. But I can also say that I've got evidence that he has plans, they have plans. What's most important is that, again, he is a spokesperson. He took a job, he's doing a job. I have to say that in my interviews with Captain Mark Richards, he's talked about how his wife is basically a contact with an ET race that is influencing Trump, and that is an interesting take on things. I believe she would have been, one of the children that came out of the sort of Eastern Bloc, if you will, countries, and would be part of what you call that child sort of abduction and kidnapping schemes that basically Epstein was a part of. And I do want to say something about Epstein now. I guess I don't know what the status is of him in jail, but it's very likely they're going to try to kill him, because you can appreciate that he doesn't like being the fall guy for everyone. And I don't believe that he is quite the blackguard that he's being painted out to be, which does not mean I don't know how involved he was involved with all of this sort of, sexually molesting children or young people or liking girls young, or however you want to put it. But I can say that this is rampant in races around the world, and especially in the Middle East. It's a style of being. And apparently he was working with the Mossad and Israel. And so I have to say that there's a lot more to the story. He's the tip of the iceberg. It may be that he would be a great whistleblower at this point because they've turned on him. I'm sure they have to kill him because if he talks, they're going to be toast. I wouldn't be surprised. And so this, if people would just, think a little deeper and a little higher and a little longer about some of these stories that come out, and keep in mind that when someone gets targeted by the Illuminati, a lot of times it's one of their own members. That's what they do. They actually throw them before the dogs so that they can take your attention away from the real story. And the story is the network. The story is the reptilian DNA within humanity. Now, the seeding of humanity prior, there were many seedings of humanity, the story goes. And some of this is in the books, Voyager books by Ashiana Dean, and it's other places as well. But I highly recommend them if you want to know the real history of humanity, as I say many times. But in essence, what happens is the various seedings didn't have the reptilian brain, what we call the reptilian brain. And eventually they found that they all got decimated, in essence, eaten and taken over by all the ET races that would invade Earth. And so what they decided to do was bring in the reptilians, give us a reptilian brain, and have that DNA part of the 12, races that initially created this, what we call a human vehicle. And we're all spirits having a material existence. So we are not reptilian, but our vehicle contains what we call a reptilian brain. And actually, you may also consider the Kundalini orgone aspect of it, thanks to the reptilian DNA portion. However, certain groups of humanity have higher degrees of concentrations of reptilian DNA. Those are the Bushes, basically the blue bloods, and the so-called royal families, etc. And they do have bloodlust. That's where you get Dracula. That's where you get, the preying on children and the whole pedophile thing. They are feeding, like Greys, reptilians, and Draco do, on the glandular substance within humans, as well as just eating us, using us as sex slaves, etc. Mark Richards has talked extensively about this for many years now. I've interviewed him, I think, for at least 5 years. I'm the only journalist who has. And like I say, I have 10 interviews with him. But I also interviewed William Tompkins about right before he died, which he's now been gone for about a little less than a year, about 9 months or so. And he was more or less related to the Pleiadians. And William Tompkins talked about Dr. Robert Wood, who is part of the Majestic Documents, who worked for TRW for many, many years and is also part of the Navy. And the fact that the two of them knew and discussed openly, and this is in my interview, the fact that the whole pedophilia, human sex slave operations on planet Earth is far worse, including Satanism, Luciferianism, far worse than even I could imagine. And I've been clued into this for most of my life, really. And all I can tell you is that's what they said to me. I was like surprised that he was going to say something like that. And then he was shut up. He was told never to speak to me again. He called me, told me he's never allowed to speak to me again. And right shortly after that, he died. Now, whether he was given, a ticket to Mars and is now living there, whether the Pleiadians took him, whether he got the reverse aging pill that he wanted so desperately for himself and his family, I don't know. Or he was simply killed. But he was a Navy witness who was sponsored by the Navy, handled by the Navy, and the Navy had their hands all over him. But he was releasing a great deal of great information on a 3-hour interview with me. So highly recommended on my website.
Thank you very much. I saw some of his work too, very impressed by it. And these people that are getting locked up or killed, and you don't know if they're actually killed, maybe they have been put in some witness protection program, and it's just been we've just been told that they were killed. But people that are being silenced and all that, I ought to get your take on something where you got silenced to a great degree. I did watch that episode, a Project Camelot TV episode that aired on True TV. I think it was after one of the episodes of Conspiracy with Jesse Ventura that aired. It was about Mars to a great extent, and Alfred Weber, when I interviewed him, he actually told me that was supposed to air earlier than it did, but they wanted to wait until after Obama got into office, because one of the things you covered was how Obama was part of a space program that got him to Mars, and they didn't want anybody to hear that until after he had already been elected to his second term. But what I'm really interested in is what were some of the other things in future episodes that you wanted to talk about that, and what exactly happened that prevented that program from getting aired for, among other things, too much sensitive information the shows they don't want us to hear about. What happened, and what did you want to talk about in some future episodes? Now's your chance to talk about those things.
Okay, well, in essence, I've been talking about those things in Camelot and interviewing people specific to those things since, for most of the time since then. And that was shot in 2009. It didn't come out, as I recall, until a year or two later, because they put it on the shelf and I was there when this happened, our producer was called by the CIA. I transferred the call because the call came from Gordon Novell, who I had always known was CIA, and he called me up when we were shooting. He's in that show, and that show is available, by the way, if you go to About Us on the projectcamelot.tv website, and you'll see the link down there, so it's easy to find that way. But in essence, what happened was Bill Ryan and I co-produced that show. We brought all our witnesses, or a lot of top witnesses, to that show. And then the organizers and the television network that wanted to make a sister show to Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura. So that's what we were. We were supposed to be a series, but this CIA agent called our producer and said, if you let us manage your show, run your show, then you will go to series. If not, then c'est la vie. And in essence, our producer told them no. And I saw him do so. Now, I know that he was then fired. We got a new producer. We got a new director who was also fired. They reworked some of the show, and then they packaged it and put it on the shelf, in essence. And it never went anywhere. So except it was shown on True TV, like about a year or two later, they announced it, that it was going to be shown on a Friday. Our dedicated viewers let us know, so we had enough time to notify people and to get a copy of it. And so now it's on my website. It's also on Bill Ryan's website. So, and during the shooting of that show, they tried to get rid of me ostensibly because they wanted Bill Ryan to be the new Jesse Ventura, like the big tough guy. And of course, I interfered with that also because I was the lead interviewer in Camelot. And then what they did is they took all my lines and gave them to Bill. So he had to go in the studio and dub in and add a bunch of lines that he never said when we were shooting on location. And basically they shut me up as much as possible. So you'll see, if you watch it, you'll see me standing there silent, which if anyone knows me from Camelot, they're going to know that I never do that. That I'm quite forthcoming and aggressive when it comes to interviewing and so on. Now, as far as Andy Abishago, who was interviewed by us on that show, specifically, he believes that he has been to Mars, and he believes he saw Obama there, and so on. And this is what Alfred Weber is referring to. So that's why the show never made it to the fore. As far as everything in the show, well, it's already on Camelot. So, you can watch all our interviews with Bob Dean, all our interviews with all the people in the show, Gordon Neville, Brian O'Leary, who actually talks about the death threats he got. And then he tried to call us after we filmed the episode with him, the part of the episode with him, and he was in a state of paranoia and basically calling us from Vilcabamba, Ecuador, saying that could we please remove his segment, and our producers refused to do so. He died less than a year later of fast-acting cancer, and I believe they killed him. So what else? There's another number of other great, Camelot witnesses on that show. There's also a disinformation agent that was put in the show by the producers, whose name is Sean Carroll, who is a physicist he was at the time over at Caltech, and a very well-known young physicist who they arranged to have us interview. However, during the interview, he started telling lies, and I called him on it. And he started saying things, stupid shit, like there was no such thing as remote viewing and so on. And like, it's out in the public domain. There are books about it. It's like, and I know the people involved in it, and, it was complete nonsense. And basically we have a contact over at Caltech, a very secret contact, who told us that Caltech has some scientists that are read in and some that are not. And he is not. Now, whether he's been read in since then, whether he had an inkling that he was lying to us on camera, I don't know. But when I asked him a certain question, he took the mic that was around his neck and ripped it off and said, I didn't sign up for this, and stomped off the set. And it was great, movie making, if you want, or, television. But they cut that and put it on the cutting room floor, as they say, and nobody's the wiser except for us. So that's just a little incident that happened during the filming.
Thank you. And regarding how people should go about handling if they are threatened or blackmailed, when I interviewed Eddie Craig, Rule of Law Radio co-host, one of the last things I discussed in that interview was how, in that presentation that he gave on InfoWars way back in April of 2013, I think it was, where he exposed how no government has authority to regulate anything that the common people do if they're not under contract with the government. No harm, no crime. And the main purpose of that presentation exposed that using the roads for non-commercial purposes is a right and not a privilege. It's only if you're in commerce that driving is a privilege. And that video seems to have thrown a little bit of a monkey wrench in the police's ability to steal from the common people through the traffic ticket scam, and the court's ability to get away with get away with it. And I asked Eddie, have you gotten any threats about this? And if you haven't, how do you explain the fact that you're not getting any threats for making something like this? And there are some other whistleblowers and public informants who are. And well, Eddie's response was, let me make it clear that threatening me is not going to make me shut up. If they do try to threaten me, the first thing I'm going to say is, I'm not going to give in to your threats. If you want to kill me, you're going to have to kill me, because I'm not going to shut up. If you kill my family, I'm not going to shut up either. And well, also in regards to that thing about Snowden, not exposing the 9/11 stuff because he fears that they'll make good on their threat to kill lots of people. One could make the argument, well, Snowden, so what if people die? We're all infinite consciousness. There's no reason for you to chicken out in that regard. And not only that, if the powers that be do make good on their threat, they're going to create so much bad karma for themselves that it would only speed up the awakening of humanity. In fact, Cliff High, the webbot guy, back in the day made an interview saying the reason that they won't kill David Icke is because he is, for all intents and purposes, the Gandhi of our time, who they fear the most, and killing him would only speed up the awakening process of humanity and allow humanity to gain independence, just like how killing Gandhi caused bad luck for the people that killed him and allowed India to speed up its independence. And I can't help but wonder if the reason that some people that they're going after now who they didn't go after before, like Julian Assange and John of God, and also in my home state of Pennsylvania, Kathleen Kane, the Attorney General, who says she's done nothing wrong in this plot to silence her and throw her in prison, is because she discovered lots of pedophilia stuff on the internet. Now, they could have gone after all these people, but they decided not to because they didn't want to create bad karma for themselves. But now that the powers that be are scurrying like rats in a basement, they decide, well, now we have no choice but to go after these people. It may lead to our downfall, but hey, we have no choice because we're a survival race base. Let's just arrest them and hope that we can postpone our downfall for as long as possible. Do you think my theories are right here? But am I perhaps taking it too far, saying that we should not give in to threats? We should, if they murder our families, just take that as inspiration to keep working harder.
Well, I don't agree with most of what you said, simply because the powers that be are not worried about bad karma. It's a little late for that. That's not how they view it. Basically, if they view it at all, they're viewing it from the standpoint of dark magicians. And keep in mind that some of these people fully and totally believe in what they're doing. They think they're doing a good thing because they're keeping secrets from the people because they think you can't handle the truth. And so it's about what's their rationale for doing what they do. But I can assure you that dark magicians don't care a jot about bad karma. That's what they're all about. The reality is that they have a way of basically handling, so let's say the undertow or the backflow from doing a negative act, which is to tell you about it before they do it. If you're too stupid to get out of the way, they figure they're cleared. And in a sense, in terms of the law of, good and evil, if you want to call it that, that is to some degree the case in this sector. Now, the fact is that there's a lot of confusion out there. I'm not a person that believes that the dark side is necessarily losing. I do believe they're losing ground. However, if you understand that this is a yin and yang, sector, then it is built on positive and negative, and that positive and negative needs to be more or less in balance. The trouble is right now is that the negative overpowers the positive, and has for many years on this planet. So what we're really trying to do is bring it back into balance. And so I don't view it the kind of the way you're talking about. Now, as far as what you were saying about David Icke being Gandhi, not even close. But I mean, I love David Icke. He's a lovely guy. He's done some very good things. Other things, he hasn't really touched on. So I just think he's just a regular person who's done the best job he can, and under the circumstances. And I have interviewed him, by the way. Let's see, what was the rest of all of that? Something about.
If you tell the powers that be after they threaten you that you're not going to shut up just because they threaten you, that would actually decrease the probability of them actually making good on their threats. Because, why try to kill someone who's not gonna to shut up when it would
Well,
create
they still kill people. I mean, there are some people like to say they don't kill people anymore, that they used to, but they don't anymore. But I can name several of my whistleblowers who it does appear they have killed, and they did hit me with a scalar weapon, whatever you call it, on the side of the head, and I had to heal myself from that. It took me about a year. And I have to say that they've done other things to us, to threaten us in essence, but we have had help, and also we've helped ourselves, if you will. You know, all I can say is that I did say, I actually wrote it on my website in a message to them at the time when I got hit by that you might as well not waste your time. You might as well just kill me because I'm not going to stop. So, that's just a decision between you and your maker, if you want to call it that. You need to come to your own spiritual sort of conclusion. Now, people that have children and families that they want to protect, I can understand their holding back and or putting out disinfo to save their own lives or the lives of their families and friends. I can say that when they hit you, they do try to go through your people close to you, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's not an easy decision, I have to say. Now, what I do say to people is that if you can understand that your child is a soul just like you that came in here with a mission, and they hope to fulfill their mission. So it's not just up to you to basically protect them. That in essence, when they came in, they took on the sort of responsibility for their own well-being. And you are not their God. So you're not in charge of whether they live or die. You can certainly try to influence that situation as best you can, but I'm just saying it's always good to remember that we're all spirits coming in for a material existence, and that we do this out of choice in the end of the day. And I have to say that I would never, I have many whistleblowers who have thrown in disinfo. I have a person who tries to be my handler who tells me disinfo time to time. I know he's telling me disinfo, but look, I know people that are telling me disinfo all the time. I know people that fall into that sort of trap, sort of inadvertently. They also get mind controlled, even temporarily, in themselves, etc. It's not an easy game out there. I think it behooves us to be sympathetic, to understand the very difficulty that goes with telling the truth. But I can also say that we have a lot of company nowadays, and more truth tellers out there. And the more there are of us, the more we will succeed.
Yes, and but sometimes the process becomes complicated when you got people in similar areas of research giving out information that they believe is true to their heart, but it kind of flies in the face of something some other people have said. Case in point, I did actually interview John there myself. It's actually been the most popular interview in terms of view count that I've done on my show, as a matter of fact. And shortly before that interview, I watched the talks that you and Bill Ryan did back in the day with Richard Hoagland. And Richard Hoagland is kind of one of those love-hate guys who knows a lot more than he's willing to tell people. And Alex Collier claimed in one of his talks in the 90s that he did approach Richard shortly after Richard gave his famous Cydonia presentation and asked him why he won't tell the world that the moon is artificial. And Richard said, "I'm not ready to because I think it would frighten too many humans." And well, I find that to be sad. That I don't think humans can handle the truth is a good answer, because I feel that humans need a nice kick in the pants for all the stuff that they've done, being fearful and paradigmatic and stupid, not being able to handle the truth. But when it comes to, I don't want to talk about that too much as I want to talk about people discussing contradictory things and having us who want to seek truth trying to make up our minds. In the case of Hoagland and Lear, I remember Richard Hoagland in his talk with with you guys, he was talking about the moon, and you guys asked him, you think maybe you got the wrong conspiracy, because maybe the moon landings were actually faked? It's like you're saying they were real. And Hoagland even said, you are wrong, dear John Lear, the moon has no atmosphere. I love the poetry, but that's going to cause a lot of people to scratch their heads, because John Lear asserted that the moon has a saffron yellow color, and if he's right, then a lot of people at NASA and a lot of past astronauts have a lot of explaining to do. So when you see these contradictions made by people in similar areas of research, do you agree or disagree with my take that you need to address those contradictions? You need to get in people's faces, well, not literally in their faces, but approach it in a nice manner and say, hey, this contradicts what someone else says. I need to find the truth, so I need to address this with you. How do you make sense of this? Why do you think you're giving different info than this other person is?
Well, I do that. And I have a recent interview with John Lear. I don't know if you maybe didn't hear it, in which he tells me to shut up partway through the interview. Listen, John Lear is a lovely man. He is basically gone on the line to tell the truth in some areas. He's also been a disinfo agent on other areas because he is basically managed by the MJ-12. And what can I tell you? He's trying to safeguard himself, his family that's very dear to him, and this is understandable. So I can say that he will harp on and on about not going to the moon because we didn't go conventionally to the moon in the way that they describe, as William Tompkins says, and as our whistleblower back in the day, Arthur Neumann, said at the very beginning of Camelot, we went to the moon, but we had help. And that is exactly the case. So the Apollo story is a fiction, and Kubrick was hired to film the fictional side so that they would be able to safeguard the stuff they really did come across, which they knew they were going to come across because they'd already been warned away from the moon when they arrived and before they arrived. And they met, as William Tompkins says, reptilians on the surface. So it's not possible to film your landing if you're surrounded by reptilian vehicles and, 12-foot or 9-foot reptilian beings. So you can appreciate what Kubrick did for them. Unfortunately, John wants to, or his mission, especially lately, is to disinfo this sector. And I think the bottom line is that he has been tasked. Basically, they felt that he went too far, that he told too much truth, that he's basically pushed the envelope and he needs to pull it back. So he's been working very hard in the past approximate year to pull back some of the things he used to say. And he's been emphasizing other things that were disinfo even then. But he, in essence, if you say, well, it's just like the alien autopsy. If you say the being isn't human, but you don't say what it is, it's not, you're still not getting to the root of it. So just like, well, we never went to the moon that way, but he doesn't say that. And, there are so many problems with his testimony right now. It's very sad. When he told me to shut up in my recent interview with him, I was asking him a very interesting question having to do with the Admiral Wilson documents that I've analyzed extensively. And basically, if you gel all that material down, and I forget how many pages it is, I think 15 or something, it all comes down to the fact that there was an admiral in if I remember the year right, 1997, who decided to go on a hunting expedition within our government. And at the time, he was a rear admiral reporting to the admiral who was head of the DIA. So he was the deputy director of the DIA. And he was also one of the J2 handling intelligence for the Joint Chiefs. And he found out that there was a hidden reverse engineering of alien technology program. And it was what you call an unacknowledged special access program. And Greer at the time was sort of stirring up the hornet's nest, if you will. And I guess that we don't know if it was actually his senior officer. In other words, his senior officer being, again, the head of the DIA, who's who's a general. I'm trying to remember his last name. I think it's Hughes, but I could have that wrong, so I hate to misquote myself. But anyway, the general that he reported to, whether he went above or around, his superior officer would be highly unlikely back in those days. So what's more likely is that his general sent him on a fishing expedition. To rattle the bushes, he made it as far as the defense contractor, which appears to have been Northrop, but I'm not positive of that. I traced the information back, and it seemed to go to that particular one. But in essence, they're all linked in the background anyway, so it doesn't really matter which one it was. But, it's one of the top 5 defense contractors that are even known in the public domain that are working with the secret space program. And they had within their group a reverse engineering of alien technology program. Now, this admiral basically talked to their program manager, their head of security, and their lawyer, I believe it was, at the Pentagon in a meeting, and basically said to their face, I should be in charge of this program. Why don't I know anything about it? And they basically turned to him and said, you don't have a right to know. And basically, that's it. Get out, shut up, and otherwise you're going to lose your stars, and you're never going to be promoted. So he shut up. He was promoted to head of the DIA, and eventually he retired. And all of this came to the surface in a set of documents that were delivered again to this hapless Australian researcher called James Rigney, who will not let anyone interview him, probably with good reason, because he might blow it. And he got the documents ceded to him. They involve Hal Puthoff. They involve Eric Davis. And supposedly they were hunting for the program themselves. This was back in 2002, I think it was, something like that. And this has also just recently come out. These copies of these documents are being ceded to the public. And again, this all goes back to the stars trying to be part of the disclosure, trying to manage and spin disclosure in a certain way. So you have a rogue admiral who back in 97 basically found out about what is in essence the secret government, secret space program. He tried to get involved, he tried to find out about it, and he was sent away. But I have a secret witness who's told me that his general was fully read in. So his general knew what he was doing. They sent him on a fishing expedition, maybe to test, the parameters of who would fold and who would stand up against a scrutiny by someone from the mainstream government. I don't know, but that's what happened. And so I can't remember your question, but in essence, these are the games they play and what's going on right now.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, my filibustering my guests before giving them the floor, I tend to ask a lot of questions, so I don't blame you for not remembering everything. I don't even remember everything I asked myself. So, although John Leary's saying he's been disinforming recently, he didn't come across as wanting to disinform in my interview with him. Whenever I asked him a question about a subject that he wasn't familiar with, and I asked him, what's your take? Do you have anything to say about this? He would just say, no, sorry, not my area of expertise. Next question, please. And it seemed like that was kind of evidence that he wanted to tell the truth, because if he wanted to disinform and had an agenda to disinform, he wouldn't have said that. He would have just tried to tell me some sort of a lie.
You have to realize that he has it's very important. You got to be specific. John has been given a remit of certain things to roll back about the secret space program. Not everything under the sun, but some very specific things. And he's been given, in essence, a party line to follow. Now, how was he given it? Was he given it through mind control? Was he given it when he spends all the time going to doctors and he gets shot up with a zillion drugs right now? I mean, I don't know. Was he, does he think that he just came upon this suddenly in his own, way of thinking? I mean, you kind of have to, again, you have to analyze it. Just because he doesn't lie about everything doesn't mean he doesn't lie about anything. You got to understand, it's not black or white. It's many shades of gray. And this is, if you follow John through his testimonies, and I've interviewed him probably more than anyone. So all my interviews with him are on my site. And I've even interviewed him in the last couple of years more. In fact, I interviewed him on stage at Laughlin. And we had quite an interesting conversation. He was chock full of drugs. He couldn't even hardly sit up straight. He was in very bad shape at that time. Seems he's improved somewhat since then. But he said quite a number of things on stage. And that interview that I did has never been released to the public. That may have been the trigger. It may be since then he's been threatened, and all the way. I don't know when you interviewed him, but I'm just telling you what I know. And I have to say that I probably know more than most people. I was even at his birthday party, I think it was not this year, but the last year, in which now I've been banned from the birthday party because certain people who will remain nameless at the birthday party didn't want me there. I love John. I think he's done some wonderful disclosing and whistleblowing for the public, and he is a truly unique individual, and I love his family as well, so I certainly understand wanting to protect them.
Love him too. That's why I donated to him when he put that thing up about his air conditioning being down. So definitely someone I think in fact, if he's sometimes on painkillers, there's no reason to not trust him. That's what he does to keep himself going at his age. But anyhow, let's switch gears and something else here I want to talk about. The subject of Antarctica never seems to not come up in conversation in the present time a lot with all that's been going down there. I was at Alien Con in Los Angeles over the summer solstice. There were sessions that were talks there, panels, and even one-person talks where Antarctica was discussed in huge detail. And it seems like the thing about Atlantis seems to be the thing that most people have a tough time understanding regarding Antarctica, because many people seem to think that the thing about Atlantis, it wasn't just a one location place. The general consensus seems to be that it was a big continent that existed in the Atlantic Ocean, but it had global places from anywhere in Egypt and even Indonesia, and even Antarctica apparently. But that was some people have gone as far as saying it was actually Antarctica that may have been the main hotspot of Atlantis, and not the continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So we could talk all day long about Antarctica, but I want to specifically, just because for time constraints, focus specifically on this Atlantis stuff dealing with Antarctica. What do you know about the ties that Antarctica has with Atlantis?
Well, my understanding is that Atlantis was a worldwide civilization. I also believe the continents have shifted since then, and it's very likely that the continent of even the part that was in the Atlantic, some of it could have shifted down towards Antarctica anyway. But regardless of that, the fact is they have found signs and evidence and incredible stuff down in Antarctica that they are uncovering, and technology that harks back to Atlantis, etc. And Antarctica is also a place where they consider to be one of the few places on planet Earth at this time that can't be surveilled by all of the different governments, etc. So that they go down there to meet with ETs and to have basically to deal with that. And also there's evidence that certain individuals from our governments have been going down to Antarctica to get orders from an ET race down there. Now, it may be the Anunnaki, or it may be those from Aldebaran who were involved with giving the Nazis the technology in the early days of the Nazi Empire that are still down there in an underground base called New Berlin. It may be them that they're reporting to, or it may even be some other parties that we don't even know about. Could be a race. I've always questioned the name Antarctica because it sounds like Antarctica. And they always like to put things in plain sight. So I wonder if the ant beings or insectoids might not have a substantial presence down there. And I know that they have special telescopes Specifically, they can see certain parts of the sky, etc. And I've been told that they orchestrate Solar Warden from there. And Solar Warden is our fleet of craft that is part of the secret space program that, in essence, is safeguarding our solar system. So they basically, surveil this solar system, Solar Warden. And so, yes, and Atlantis, the signs of Atlantis are coming to the surface in various places, and that was prophesied. It's also part of what's happening as a result of the shifting of the continents and what's happening here on planet Earth. In other words, this idea of global warming is complete nonsense, but there is climate change because our planets are shifting, because we are moving through a different part of the solar galactic whatever, and we're moving closer to the galactic center, if I understand it correctly, merging with the Sagittarius constellation. And all of these things are affecting all of the planets, not just Earth, in our solar system. And humans have nothing to do with global warming. And so, in essence, what we're talking about is continents on the move. And I'm a precog. I have dreams of the future that do come true. And I have seen land masses coming up out of the ocean rather suddenly in certain areas, even off the coast of San Francisco, for example. And I also know that I've gotten information that there's signs of Atlantis that are going to come to the surface near Cuba, for example. So this is going on right now. And of course, I have a special interest in Atlantis. I do believe that we're revisiting the challenges of Atlantis. I believe that all of time is in essence a spiral, so that if you think of the spiral is, I think, the basic unit of this universe or megaverse. And in essence, that with what's true of a spiral is that when you go around, you come around to the same place, but you're up a level or down a level. And so you see it from a different vantage point. And that is in essence what is happening. And so we are revisiting the time of Atlantis from a different perspective at a different level. And the challenges of Atlantis are the challenges we are facing now. We are very close to the same level, not quite, but close to the same. And the secret space program is certainly there, but it's just that most of humanity is in the dark and living in the dark ages. So it's, hard to say a blanket statement, but nonetheless, we're revisiting the time of Atlantis now, the challenges of Atlantis, and the point is that we need to overcome and meet those challenges in a better way than they did back in those days.
Right, and the idea that 2019 is a year of disclosure, I think we might as well talk about this a little bit in the short time we have left. It was mentioned by Brad Johnson, who channels Adronis, that Nevada would be a very, very hot spot of activity regarding disclosure. And he mentioned that again in a recent video he did talking about the end of the dark. He actually said the whole Area 51 Million Man March Stampede raid on the base is a distraction. And I left a comment there saying, what are you talking about, a distraction? It was you who said several months ago that Nevada would be a hot spot regarding 2019 being the year of disclosure. I mean, couldn't this Area 51 thing actually be a big, like, a spark plug of sorts to help that thing manifest? And he responded to my comment actually and said, no, you're mistaking two different things. It has nothing to do with 2019 being the year of disclosure, this whole Area 51 Stampede thing. However, I cannot help but wonder if the fact that this thing that some guy jokingly did, and just for the hell of it, I might as well point out, for a little while I actually thought I started this whole thing because of Contact in the Desert during a panel discussion where Stephen Bessette was leading. I actually said, do you think we need to wake up humanity the hard way by force, by maybe, I don't know, Million Man March Stampede on Area 51, and I had like put my fat ass in the front of the Stampede to be the front man, point man, and everybody laughed at me. And Stephen Bissette's response was, "No, I don't think that's necessary." But when I heard this Area 51 thing was going on, I was like, "Holy shit! Did I start this?" And well, no, I didn't. I found out it was some other guy who got the idea from a Joe Rogan radio interview. But I can't help but wonder, because when things happen on a global scale, it affects the consciousness of humanity at a great level. Could it be out of the question to assert that this whole thing about the Stampede, Million Man March Stampede on Area 51, will actually help manifest whatever it is that Bashar was talking about, not Bashar, Adronis was talking about when he said Nevada would be a hotspot of activity this year regarding 2019 being a disclosure year?
Well, Nevada is always a hot spot. So if you're going to do disclosure, that wouldn't be too surprising. As far as this, storm Area 51 idea, I posted about this, and basically my position on it is that it's a great idea, but it's also a stupid idea. In other words, we already know that they're going to stop the humans that try to do that. So they will have helicopters and everything in place, I'm sure, to stop them. But the fact is that it's the fact that 1 million people responded positively to the idea of it. And in essence, we are virtually, you could kind of take us in a time capsule and say that's exactly what we're doing. We're storming the whole notion of Area 51 to reveal the ET presence, to force the acknowledgement that the secret space program exists, that the ETs are not only here, but interacting with us and our governments and our militaries, etc. In essence, people are waking up in droves around the world, and this is a reflection of that. So I can completely understand and sympathize with the notion, and I say metaphorically, we're doing it anyway. Now, what should the powers that be take away from that? That's what's interesting, because in essence, these paltry efforts of releasing, 12 pages over here and 15 pages over here, and then arguing about it and lying about it, and nobody getting the real point anyway, and giving it to these researchers who don't have the balls, sorry to say, to actually question these people. They're so busy being kiss-ass to be, their sort of go-to people, that they don't have the balls to ask the direct questions, to call these people out on what they say, and, to push the timeline along and to actually involve themselves in a real dialogue. So this is the trouble, okay? But thank God we have plenty of people out there that are pushing the envelope in their own way. So Area 51, storm it. In essence, we're doing that. And the powers that be, I think that shows a wake-up call to them. I think in essence it says to them, hey, we are willing, or at least 1 million strong, and I have 62 million viewers worldwide. So if they decided to storm anywhere, to put their feet where their mouth is, so to speak, and to vote with their feet, as the saying goes, it would be a frightening thing for the powers that be, and they had better get their act together. So yes, disclosure is in essence now. We are disclosure. But if you want someone from an authority position to stop lying to you, then, I don't blame you one bit. And I think that it sends a wake-up call. So whether it will be successful, whether it will be understood, and anything will come of it, and whether it comes out of, Nevada or not. I mean, Nevada has been a hot spot through this whole thing. So what can I say? I wouldn't contradict that, but I can say, as far as alien bodies underground in Area 51, it's very possible they were always in, you had to take a maglev down to Dulce base to really see the alien bodies, and other places like supposedly Wright-Patterson and a few other bases. Whether aliens were really ever, at least lots of bodies hanging about underground in Area 51 or not, I don't know. But I do know that over the years they shifted a lot of things from that base One, to underground in Idaho, for one thing, and two, possibly to Sandia, which John Lear talks a lot about, and so on. So, the Area 51 is like kind of old news, but but the spirit of the thing is out there, and it's legitimate.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more subject, and I guess I'll end on the possible time periods regarding big shifts in the future of humanity, consciousness-wise and whatnot. Now, 2024 is supposed to be a very big hotspot year because that's the year of the end of Pluto in Capricorn, and also around that same time period when Pluto exits Capricorn is when the solar eclipse that will travel across America kind of in the opposite direction from the one that crossed America in August of 2017, where the crisscross point of those two eclipses is Carbondale, Illinois. That eclipse on the day after I turned 38 years old, April 8th, 2024, and the day my youngest brother actually turns 30, will be the end of, some people assert, of the time period that will signify the end of the Roman Empire of the modern era, that is the United States of America. And, well, that would be nice if that was the case, but, well, it makes sense in a sense, considering that Pluto and Capricorn last time it happened was American Revolution, and that was also the same time period when there was eclipses traveling from one end of America to the other, and it kind of made, well, time is cyclical, so who's to think the same thing isn't going to happen again? And when it comes to the idea of ET disclosure, some different dates have been given, two different contactees, Bashar and Adronis. Bashar has said it was going to be like the mid-2030s. Adronis, on the other hand, has said that based on the probability and the rate humanity's awakening and everything, it will actually be later. It would be around 2050 when that happens. When I'm talking about true disclosure, where the ETs basically come down and say, hi, we were here all along, we've been here all along, the ancient astronaut theorists and the UFO nuts and the conspiracy theorists who talked about us were right all along, and now you have no choice but to acknowledge that because we're showing our presence. That kind of disclosure would happen no earlier than like mid-2030s, no later than 2050, if you believe Bashar and Adronis. And one more thing, getting back to Adronis, that he said that was very kind of inauspicious, if you will. Shortly after the asteroid Apophis is possibly going to hit the Earth in 2036, if it does cross that keyhole on Friday the 13th, 2029, and does hit Earth shortly after that, is when he asserts, based on the probability of consciousness humanity awakening, there is going to be a 3 days of darkness in the 2036-2037 period, where humanity is going to go through a major consciousness shift, and we may actually have to put ourselves in underground bunkers, because if we go outside, it's not going to be pleasant. And when we have, after the end of 3 days of darkness, it's going to be a completely transformed world. And it sounds nice and all, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh no, not this again. We've been down this road before, where people channeling either ETs or higher levels of spirit say some big consciousness shift is going to happen on a given date, and it doesn't happen. People like George Kavassilis, Tolek, and others have done that, and they lost a lot of credibility when they were wrong, even though they mean well and all. So I've babbled long enough. Let's end on this note. These time periods that I've given and what you see happening regarding the time of disclosure. What's your take on all this?
Okay, well, I would say that they don't have that long. So it's not going to take that long. What are you saying, 2030, 2050? Are you kidding me? I mean, humanity cannot remain that stupid for that long, in my view. I think that what's happening right now is that what you see in this sort of effort to spin disclosure so strenuously is that they are coming to a kind of an end game in the way they've been operating up to now. And in essence, the game is up, and they need to disclose, because also, from what I understand, various ET races have also had it with the secrecy, and they want to force the issue themselves. So for various reasons, actually, some good, some bad. And so I think that this is being disclosed. I think there will always be factions of humanity that are living in the dark and that are, in essence, blinded by religion. And and that is huge, and you can't really get around it. I think that these stupid prophecies, in my opinion, are just that. If you want to talk about Pluto and Capricorn and the revolution, we're already there. This is it. Pluto's in Capricorn again, and we're in revolution. We're very close to it, to the beginning to basically a revolution in our society. Look all around you, you'll see. And they are trying hard to make two strong camps of it, in every country, but especially in the United States. But it's in England as well. So, pro-Brexit, anti-Brexit in the US, pro-Trump, anti-Trump. There is possibility for civil war in the United States. I have seen timelines in which we do have a civil war in the United States. I've seen timelines where Washington is no longer the center of the capital. It's all in Colorado underground, and the United States is split. So these things could come to pass. When? I don't put years on them, so I have no idea. I just know what I've seen. But on the other hand, maybe what I'm seeing is a timeline that's not going to happen. So timelines are mutable. What we understand is about timelines is there are many timelines, and you need to read the Seth material for more on this, but that there are some what you call significant milestones or things along those timelines that all the timelines will share. And those particular things basically are, as I say, shared among them. So they will, in theory, they were agreed upon on many levels. And so they will probably happen regardless of what timeline we're on. So as far as, in essence, disclosure, I have seen myself in an underground base when they are bombing Hawaii because of there is a large gray infestation underground base under Hawaii, and I am concerned about the ecosystem in Hawaii being threatened by this bombing, and that the military troops that we are sending to get involved in this, they don't know what I'm telling you right now. So if and when that happens in our fairly new future, and I would think it was within the next 10 years, then disclosure hasn't fully happened, that's for sure. But I am consulting to the military in an underground base in that scenario, which sounds kind of amazing in and of itself. So I have no idea whether that's what I saw. It was like real. It wasn't like a dream. It was like, a vision, more of a vision. But, I can't tell you whether it's really going to happen or not, or it was just a possible timeline. So I don't know. I understand astrological, trying to drill down on that. And I think there is some validity there. Although a lot of times, we get to the place where the astrology was talking about, and in essence, it never happens quite the way they talk about. And it's so general that, yeah, we're going to have unrest. Yeah, we're going to have, some disclosure. Well, we're having some disclosure right now. It's just a lot of people aren't listening.
Right, and people like you and me are going to try to change that. And, well, that being said, we've kind of gone over the 2-hour mark, and like I said, and I bitched about this nonstop, humans have lousy attention spans, and we probably shouldn't go too much longer, or people will it'll cut back on the viewing audience. So, but with having you on this show, I do hope that will greatly change for me. And by the way, if you want to, you are more than welcome to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by uploading this interview to the official Project Camelot website. I will try to have this uploaded by midnight tomorrow at the absolute latest to my channel. By all means, go ahead and upload it to yours. You're bound to. There's no question you're going to get more views than me. So if the information is that important, then please do. I encourage you to do so to help me, but more importantly, it'll wake up humanity even faster. And well, I kind of feel sad that I've never had the opportunity to meet you in person at any conference, because I get around to try to get to a lot of conferences Travel a lot to the West Coast too, because the East Coast doesn't have anywhere near as good conferences as the West Coast seems to. And the conference that you hold in the UK all the time, well, good for you traveling all there. It's just that that's going to cost a little bit, and it causes jet lag and all that. Not very convenient, but maybe sometime, someday in the near future, I will specifically try to save up money to get airline miles to go to one of your UK conferences, and I'll be listening
Well,
to you,
I
Kerry.
am
What?
speaking. I'm speaking in Yelm, Washington, this summer at the end of August. I think the 31st of August specifically. It's the 30th or the 30th. It's the whole weekend. That last weekend in August. And so I am speaking on the Saturday, and that's Yelm, Washington. So in case you're in the United States and that's not that far away. I'm also supposed to be speaking sometime this year at a UFO conference that Lorian Fenton is putting on. And that's usually in Vegas or Laughlin, but I don't know where it'll be. Maybe it's the Bay Area. I really don't know. So those are some upcoming conferences that you might be able to meet me at. And I do appreciate your time and your questions. And I have been recording this. I actually have been recording this on video, so I'll be able to put it up as a video. But maybe your audio will be even better than mine. I don't know. And I'm going to wait until you do it, and so you can just let me know, and then we'll see what happens. But I do appreciate this, and I think they were good questions, and I think people will be interested.
Yes, I do ask hard questions. Apparently, that's one reason why Simon Parks wasn't able to come on my show the one time he did when I asked him to. Apparently, well, this is what someone else believed, his manted contacts who were malevolent ordered him not to because they knew I would ask hard questions. I can't prove that, but it does kind of make sense. So glad you were able to come on, and I will get this uploaded. I'll send you the link when I do. And good luck in everything you do. I do have a lot of catching up to do regarding your interviews because I have bookmarked them all. That anything that over is half an hour long, I bookmark. And in July of 2018, onward, I still have to watch all those interviews, but I'll get to them one way or another, and watch the ones that are key and important and all that. And best of luck to you. Hope I run into you. Good luck. You've done a lot, and I'm sure you'll keep doing a lot. Take care, Kerry. Namaste.
All right. Thank you. You